What happens to everything you built if you disappear tomorrow? Who decides where your money goes? Your company, your assets, your story? And what if the answer is not you? If you don't have a will, you're not building wealth. You're outsourcing your life to the government. Because the second you're gone, your legacy turns into confusion, conflict, and sometimes a full-blown family war over things that shouldn't matter, but suddenly do. And here's the reality. Over 70% of people still don't have a will. Not because they don't care, but because it's expensive, it's overwhelming, and honestly, they don't even know where to start. So the delay. And delay is the most expensive decision you can make. Now flip this as a founder. What if you could take something complex, emotional, and avoided and turn it into a simple, guided experience that thinks with the user? Not just forms, but a system that asks the right questions, explains decisions, and helps people figure out what they actually want in real time. That's the opportunity. Because most industries aren't broken, they're just overcomplicated. And when you simplify them, you don't just create value, you unlock scale. So here's the question. Are you building something that people use or something that they put off until it's too late? Welcome to AI for Founders. I'm Ryan Estes. This is for founders who want to turn expertise into scalable products, use AI to move faster than ever, and build businesses that solve real problems people can't ignore. Today, you'll learn how to productize professional services and where AI replaces friction, not judgment, and how to build in massive markets hiding in plain sights with David Rosati. If you want sharper thinking and better opportunities in your inbox, go to aiforfounders.co. It's the newsletter founders read when they're tired of surface-level advice. It's how you stay early on what actually matters. Subscribe at aiforfounders.co and build something that compounds. And if this hit, leave a review that your future self would thank you for. And if you want to become a voice in your industry, go to kitcaster.com. They get founders booked on top podcasts so your ideas reach the people who actually make decisions. That's Kitcaster by Moburst. David, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I'm excited to talk to you today because your company is very important. It's successionwills.com. And basically, this is a flat fee product that helps you design your estate after you pass. Your last,
That's right.
but as it were. So an overview of the product itself.
So Succession Wills is an online will builder and more as well. But the main feature that is sort of the front door to the platform is an online will builder. And what that means is it's an alternative to going to a lawyer to get your last will and testament done. I am myself a lawyer. I've been practicing for 15 years, and they only did wills and estates as sort of an ancillary part of my practice. I was more of a corporate lawyer and merger and acquisition transactional lawyer. And so when I would do wills and estates for people, it was for those sorts of high net worth individuals with, multiple businesses and companies, et cetera, complicated estate planning stuff. And that being what I was used to, when I would get sort of a normal person coming to me to get their will done, whether it's friends, family, whatever, it became apparent to me that, it's kind of overkill. Most people out there, 90-something% of people, it's kind of the same deal, right? They have a house, a couple of cars, some investments in the bank, and they want to leave everything to their kids equally. That's most people's will. You don't necessarily need to spend $2,000 and a couple of weeks on going back and forth with a lawyer for that. So I wanted to create a solution for sort of the masses when I came to doing their last will and testament. And that's what's exactly it.
Incredible. And it's $79 for the download and printable, or if you want it, the printed package delivered, it's $124.99. So very reasonable price point. And just a really important solution. If you live long enough, then unfortunately you're going to have people pass, and I think probably every family has the same situation where you, on one side, you're grieving the loss of a family member, but then invariably there is some kind of grab at the end, and it gets very contentious and completely can destroy families, for many, many years, maybe permanently. if this isn't taken care of. So maybe underline that point, the importance of setting a will, and really when our audience is thinking about it, when should you start to kind of consider putting a will together?
Yeah. So, I mean, the importance of it cannot be stated strongly enough. If you pass away without a will, then there are basically default rules, depending on your state as to what happens to your assets, what happens to your wealth, and as well what happens to your kids too if you have minor children. So all a will is just a legal document where you are stating what your actual wishes are. And if you do it right, if you do that document correctly and it's signed correctly, it becomes legally binding on everybody you leave behind. So to make sure your wishes are fulfilled, it's very important to have one. And I say to people as well, it's very important to do a proper legal will, not just, write down on a cocktail napkin who you want to leave stuff to, because that can actually make it worse. Because what happens then is there's this document that says what you want to happen, but it's not properly legal and binding. And therefore, the default rules that I mentioned of what happens when somebody doesn't have a will at all, they actually apply. And now there's a conflict at play. So you're almost better off not even doing anything in that situation. It's very important to get a will done. It's very important to make sure it's done right. There are certain steps, certain features that the document has to have. It has to be signed in the correct way, et cetera. And you mentioned the hard copy mailing version that we offer. And the reason for that is in a lot of states to this day, a will is one of the few legal documents still that has to be on paper, signed in ink, the old fashioned way. You can't electronically sign, you can't docu-sign. Some jurisdictions are modernizing more so, and there are electronic options, but in a lot there aren't. And that's why we do that.
Amazing. So, as far as your customers, who do you see that's kind of like signing up for this the most? Is this kind of a boomer type ICP?
Honestly, it's the full spectrum. And you asked earlier, at what point should somebody think about doing their will? The answer is very earlier than you think. I generally recommend it to my own clients, essentially when if they're getting married or having their first child, or if they start to make a good amount of money in their career or their business or whatever it is. So those sort of are the three main triggers, and it doesn't matter how old you are. It's about if one of those three things has occurred, really.
Yeah.
And so if you have money and you want to make sure you know where it's going to go after you pass, having a will is very important, especially if you don't have a family of your own yet. And that these are the kind of things that people get wrong, right? They think, oh, well, I don't have kids, I don't have a family anyway, so what do I need a will? It actually means you need a will even more so, because the default rules I talked about, those generally assume sort of a traditional lifestyle, right? So if I pass, I'm married and I have two kids. If I passed away right now without a will, the default rules are going to leave everything to my wife and kids anyway, for the most part, in most jurisdictions. It's the young entrepreneurs or people who otherwise don't fit that mold, that it's even more important for them to have a will so that they can make sure, that particular niece or nephew or that particular charity that they had in mind is who's going to benefit.
Yeah. And then what about just kind of safeguards? Sometimes shenanigans happens at the end of people's lives, particularly our nannies and papas, and people swoop in and, you get some kind of Game of Thrones situation with getting some signatures going and stuff like that. How do you kind of protect against that kind of like coercion and fraud, perhaps?
Mm-hmm. Well, again, dealing with it early is the best medicine on that. The ultimate way to embroil your estate in controversy or fighting is to sign like a deathbed will, and that happens, right? Is you have the lawyer come to the hospital room so you can make some sort of a change to your will or something. That is by far and away what causes the most problems, especially when you're dealing with second marriages and things like that. So being as proactive as possible, honestly, would be, if I have to choose one answer, it's that.
Yeah. Amazing. And it's cut and dry, good utility, perfect product. I love it. So talk a little bit about the inception of this and kind of how you began, how you financed, kind of how you built the team out.
Mhm. Well, like I said, it started sort of just because I saw that gap myself in my own practice as a lawyer, knowing, there's a large chunk of the population out there that doesn't have a will. Uh, there are many reasons we can get into for that. I think that's a multifactorial issue, but certainly price and convenience is part of it. Um, so I saw that gap and I thought, we could really use something like this. I always had a bit of a tech bent for a lawyer. Um, Earlier in my youth, I wanted to go into coding and software and all this. This is in the early 2000s. So back then, this is like, post.com bubble and everything. Going into tech was not the thing to do to get rich, right? You go become a doctor or a lawyer. So that's what I did instead. But I always had, an eye for technology. And so very early on in my career, I was sort of self teaching a little bit of coding to myself to be able to automate certain elements of document preparation and things like that in my law practice. And a lot of that was very niche stuff that's only useful for a lawyer. But one thing that jumped out at me is, hey, if I could do this for a will, this is something that actually, the general population could use. Now, of course, I needed it to be user friendly and accessible. So I teamed up with a friend of mine. He's my partner now in this, and he's a software developer. He's been doing it for many, many years. And we've just sort of bootstrapped the whole thing. We spent a lot of time building, and that was because me being a lawyer, I'm used to, everything's got to be perfect before it goes out the door. You can't have, you're dealing with sensitive stuff, important stuff. Of course, my partner coming from the tech world is like, well, no, you get an MVP out there and you see how it goes and you build the parachute as you're falling, right? So there was a bit of a tension there during the building process. And ultimately, I kind of got my way. And so we made sure that the product is fully operational, no MVPs before we got started. So it took us a little bit of time, but we just launched in January, and we're humming along. It's great.
This episode is brought to you by a dangerous idea. It's called reading, specifically the AI for Founders newsletter. 47,000 founders strong now, and it's the good stuff. No top 10 AI tools that will change your life written by someone who doesn't ship product. It's just real breakdowns of what's actually working in AI. Who's raised, who failed, who pivoted, and which founders quietly built $1 million in ARR while everyone else was arguing on X. It's written for people building with AI. Every week you get tactical frameworks, unfair advantages, breakdowns of real companies, and the occasional existential question about whether your startup is intelligent or just well-branded. It's free, it's sharp, it might mildly offend your current workflow. Go to aiforfounders.co and subscribe before your competitor does. Because the only thing worse than being replaced by AI is being replaced by a founder who reads. That's the newsletter at aiforfounders.co. Now back to the show. Incredible. So fully bootstrapped, two-man team, and you just launched the product in January. Cool.
Correct.
And, and through the development of that product, I know that you've made some pivots in the tech stack, largely because, the AI augmented coding has become so prevalent. I mean, in the last 3 or 4 months, as it kind of really turned a corner. So talk about that, like how you began the product, developed it, and then how you decided to incorporate AI into the tool.
Well, I mean, I think AI has transformed us and our product in two big ways. There's the user facing element of it, the actual AI features that we now have in the product. And then there's, what's happening behind the scenes in terms of how it's changed how we operate. I mean, the rate of progress, the speed at which we can roll out changes or new ideas now is astronomically faster than it was a year ago. Like it's crazy. We right before the January launch, at the last minute, my partner Nick said, "I think I'm going to rebuild the whole front end. I don't really like how it looks. Let me change it." Took him, it was honestly maybe a few days. Now, don't get me wrong, the back end and all that logic was still there, unchanged, but to totally not just facelift, but redo the entire front end and UI in a matter of days, something that originally took months was, truly astonishing. So that was the first time that, hey, we're in a different world in, late 2025, early 26 than we were a year or two prior. Now, and that has filtered through to the whole thing. You said we're a 2-man team running the company. That wouldn't be possible if it wasn't for the various AI solutions that we've managed to implement. And it's been especially transformative for me because, I'm a lawyer. I'm not a tech guy, or at least I wasn't. And so a year ago, my knowledge of AI and really anything technical, extended about as far as going on to a free chat GPT account and asking it dumb questions. Right. And now I have my own OpenClaw VPS, dedicated VPS server with my OpenClaw and everything. It's wild. And I joked to Nick that it's changed even the way I speak, right? I'm finding myself in emails or calls with clients now, like as a lawyer, and I'm using various tech speak all the time because I've just gotten so used to conversing with Claude and the sort of terminology that it's using, right? So that's what's happening behind the scenes. As far as what the users see, what we've done with AI, in my view, is what truly sets us apart. So I wish I could say we're the only online will builder out there. We're not. There are others. And before online will builders, there were what were called will kit, which was like literally a kit with pieces of paper and instructions to do your own will. These things have existed for a long time. What the other online will builders do is, in my view, it's half the equation. You're trying to replace the lawyer experience, and what they do is replace half of that lawyer experience. So a traditional will builder, you log in and you basically walk through a series of questions, right? You're filling in fields, you're answering questions, you're selecting things from drop down. Basically, you're inputting your data, you're inputting your wishes into a wizard-based system, and then that wizard is doing what it needs to do on the back end and spitting out the legal document. The problem with that is it assumes that people, A, understand everything they're seeing, and B, that they already know what they want. And the reality is that's usually not the case. Sometimes that's the case, but it's usually not. It's rare that as a lawyer, I have a client come into my office and I could hand them a questionnaire with everything I need to know, and they could fill it out on the spot and hand it back to me. And now, hey, give me 5 minutes. I will pop over to my desk and draft your will for you. In reality, it's more of a back and forth conversation, right? It's me asking them questions. It's me, sort of soliciting for them to think about what they need to think about, sort of poking and prodding for answers. And they're asking questions too. In the meantime, I'm explaining concepts. I'm giving them examples or suggestions of, hey, this is what a lot of people do in that situation, et cetera. And it's more of a conversation. Well, that's the perfect job for AI. So what we've done is the will builder itself, what's actually drafting the will, is still completely deterministic model that is based on what Nick and I built from the ground up. Every line of text that could show up in that will is part of the logical and drafting process that we've set up. There's no AI doing any drafting. This is not ChatGPT drafting your will. Where our AI comes in is that it's a model that's been trained on, it's been received extra training on sort of the legal elements of wills and estates and estate planning and all that. but then it's also been trained on that app, on that deterministic will builder. And its job is to basically be the lawyer in that example that I gave you, right? Where it will walk you through the process. It will ask you the questions rather than you having to have your answers ready to go. It will answer your questions in real time, give you examples, give you suggestions in the same way a lawyer would, so that the process for the user emulates the actual lawyer experience that much more, because they now have this interpreter and this guide walking them through the process.
Yeah. Amazing. Now, there are some pretty big incumbents, in the space that are, let's say, just advertising in the Super Bowl. So as you're kind of going to market as a bootstrap product, where are you going to find your first customers?
Believe it or not, it just the old fashioned SEO works incredibly well in this space. It's an area that a lot of people have a lot of questions when it comes to wills and estate planning, and just having informative articles and informative. We want to be an authority. We want to be a resource to people outside of just the will builder itself. And the more content we produce like that, the more people come in. And it's actually been surprising how well just that traditional SEO has worked. And I'd say the other thing is that, yeah, there are some big incumbents, but it's a big market.
Yeah.
There's no short, it's literally something that everybody needs. There's no demographic almost involved here, other than, I guess, minors are not included, but it's a very, very big market. Everybody needs one. Something like 70% of Americans still do not have a will in place. So there's plenty of pie to go around.
Yeah. So talk a little bit about your SEO strategy. Like, basically, how did you determine which content to publish? When did you start publishing, and how soon did you start seeing results? And also, kind of, maybe are you starting to see LLM recommendations come in a little bit more?
I'm not sure that I've seen any LLM recommendations coming over. The SEO strategy, I mean, again, we've just gotten started. So, we launched in January in terms of putting the app live and the site live. So, and then it's taken some time to get some momentum going on the content production. So it's still an ongoing thing. We're still very early days, but honestly, it's just simple education, right? I'm a lawyer. I've been doing this for a long time. I know what kind of makes people tick in this space. And I actually have a position of authority. I have education in this space to be able to produce educational content. Obviously, it's not legal advice. It's educational content, but it comes pretty naturally as a result of my background.
Yeah, you bet. Amazing. Now let's talk about pricing. $79.99 is the price I would expect you to charge for listening to my voicemail as an attorney. I know how you guys are. How did you land on that price?
So yeah, and that surface is the key thing here. Is, again, it's not legal advice. At the end of the day, Succession Wills is a software platform. It's a self-help tool. The user is interacting with the software and essentially preparing their own will using this tool. We're not, getting on calls with people and giving them legal advice. That would be a whole separate can of worms. And that's a big way that we can keep cost and pricing down. Beyond that, honestly, the pricing is based on what we felt, the market would support in terms of, how do we reach a broader audience? How do we get that 70% of people don't have a will? How do we get that number down? And because we're bootstrapped, because we're small and nimble, we don't have large investors breathing down our necks. We don't have, a burn rate for space or this or that we need to worry about. So we're totally lean. We can offer that, the most competitive possible price. And that's essentially how we came to it.
Cool. Did you use design partners for any of the UI or for pricings, a way to kind of ballast some of your expectations and your expertise against kind of what the market wants? And then as you're looking at pricing, maybe you have a ABC type package. Did you want to kind of be priced high? How did you kind of approach that philosophically?
Mhm. Well, the pricing is still something we are uh, working through. If I'm being honest with you, the $80 or $79.99 or 124.99 for the hard copy package is sort of a all in one introductory price because we're still so new. We will most likely be breaking it down into tiers in the near future. Which that will become the middle tier. So we're going to possibly be offering an even less expensive version where it simply translates into fewer customizations available for the user, right? You're sort of taking care of the big picture stuff, the low hanging fruit, the stuff that really needs to be dealt with. And some of the bells and whistles are not there. And then we're also going to have a more advanced version with even more bells and whistles, more customization, trying to emulate that lawyer experience even more. As far as the current UI and the current pricing, plenty of research, obviously, and we do have a member of the team, in addition to Nick and I, who is she's a freelance marketer, and she is a former employee of one of the big players. So she has some pretty useful insights.
Yeah, maybe some recommendations for folks. Obviously the money, the big ticket items, whether you're talking about property, assets, cars, blah blah blah, jewelry, I guess. Those probably are kind of like pooled and then split. But a lot of times, aside from the assets, it's sentimental value, and those are kind of hard to assess. I would assume that if I pass, my kids would be interested probably in my guitars and my pocket knives or something, because it's like those are what's sentimental to me. But I really don't know what's sentimental to them. Do you kind of advise that you have this conversation openly with your family as you're starting to stitch some of this stuff together?
Yes, but with one big caveat that I actually don't recommend that be part of the process of actually drafting your will. So what often happens with these things is perfect becomes the enemy of good. Um, the more emotionally driven decisions in the process are often the hardest. And what can happen is it leads to procrastination, and it leads to, in some cases, never even getting it done, right? Because there's these few gating items that are blocking you, and you're not finishing the process. And so what I often recommend to people is just get it done. If you have to say all my stuff goes to my kids equally and leave it at that, do that. And you can come back afterwards and start to get more granular with how you want to do things. And in reality, what a lot of people do is when it comes to those sort of individual, what we call specific bequests, right? Individual item is going to this person. Um, a lot of times people will do that in a non-binding document that sort of, it's like a rider that goes along with the will, but it's not actually binding, so that if when the time comes, circumstances have changed significantly between then and the time that you wrote the will, your representatives, your executors are not sort of tied, have their hands tied by what you wrote when you got so specific in the will itself.
That's wise, because succession wills, 79.99 take you about 20 minutes to get through it, or you add in the conversation of who gets dad's lucky spoon, and now that's a 3-month process.
Yeah,
Just get it done. Let them figure it out.
and part of us putting our money where our mouth is on that is that it's a lifetime act. It's like you pay the $79.99. You're not paying for this particular will. You're paying for access to the platform. So I could go on and do my will, pay my $79.99, print it, whatever, and change my mind in a week. And I could just log back on, make the change and reprint it. I'm not being charged more or anything like that. And so the idea is access to a platform. Uh, the will builder is there for you whenever you need to redo things or change things, because that's another piece of advice I'd give to people is a lot of people treat doing their will as sort of a, set it and forget it kind of thing. Really, it should be something that you come back to every few years or with every major life circumstance change. And it should be a bit more of a living, breathing document than that, because things do change over time and you need to be able to come back. And that, again, is a way in which, we're adding value, because if you're going to a lawyer and doing that, you're paying that lawyer again, that second time around, right? They're not making those changes for free. So with it provides a very cost-effective solution where a person can have access to that for the long haul.
All right. We're at that time in the podcast where we're going to the quantum round. Are you ready for this?
As ready as I'll ever be.
All right. So I love this product and I love this category. I feel like this is going to grow. Now, you have an experience in mergers and acquisitions. Do you see other applications for this? Which is to say that the function is basically we have one singular problem. We're creating one singular document to solve that problem. It's a low cost, low barrier of entry for people to get involved with the product. It lasts a lifetime. It's brilliant. Are there other kind of legal documents that you could see kind of like a product like this springing up around?
Yeah, and this already exists. The big one, the next biggest one after wills, I think, is prenuptial and cohabitation agreements. Because it's a very similar thing, right? It's something that I know it's not very romantic, but as a lawyer, I'm trained to say that everybody should have one. If you don't have a prenup or a cohabitation agreement, then you're letting you essentially there are terms of what happens if the couple splits up. It's just that you're leaving it to the state legislature to decide what those terms are, rather than prenup. You're putting it in a contract yourself, and the two spouses are deciding what those terms are. So it's a very similar situation to wills, where most people don't have one. It's actually a far lower percentage of people actually have a prenup or cohabitation agreement. Legally speaking, it's just as wise of a thing to have. So there's this gap that exists. And just like with wills, I think it's a multifactorial issue. Obviously, it's an awkward conversation to bring up with somebody you're about to get married to. But price and convenience and all of that are a factor too. So maybe if couples could do this as something that they're doing together from the comfort of their own home and privately, maybe they would be more inclined to do them. So that's just one example. Plenty of others, whether it's partnership agreements for new businesses, that's another one. I can't tell you the number of times clients come into my office and, the business has been running for X number of years and they have nothing in place to actually say who owns what or what the terms are between them. And it's only when a dispute or something comes up that they finally want to deal with these things. So partnership agreement, NDA, there's no shortage of these sort of very, very ubiquitous legal documents that not everybody needs, but a lot of people need, that they're just not doing because going to a lawyer is seen as cost prohibitive. Now, don't get me wrong. Like with wills, I certainly am not trying to put my industry out of business. There are, if you can afford it and it's appropriate, getting proper legal advice is going to always be the best option. But the reality is that people will do what they're going to do. Like I get ChatGPT legal documents coming across my desk all the time now, right? Because people, they know they shouldn't do it. They know they shouldn't rely on ChatGPT to draft that contract, but they don't want to pay the big bucks for, when the business is early on, et cetera. So they do it anyway. And if people are going to be doing it anyway, at least, those of us those founders out there, myself included, coming up with solutions that at least mitigate some of the risk and makes it so that whatever they're producing is as um, strong as possible in the circumstances, I think is a net benefit.
Yeah. How is succession wills like going to be more bulletproof than ChatGPT? Just maybe some examples. If people are like, I did my will through ChatGPT.
Well, don't get me wrong, ChatGPT is surprisingly good sometimes with legal drafting. Um, Ultimately, it comes down to, like I said, with wills, there's very specific um, like formatting and processes for like what the will needs to contain, certain language, etc. That ChatGPT won't always catch, especially depending on which model you're on, right? Like a lot of people, they'll go on and they're on the free tier and they're on a lower model of ChatGPT. They don't necessarily realize that. They don't understand the different models and pricing tiers. And those lower models, when it comes to complex legal reasoning and drafting, are a huge difference. Like, I mean, going on to Quad Opus versus Haiku to draft a legal document is a big difference. And that's something a lot of people could stumble into without realizing. The other element is just being able to. So I guess what I'm getting at here is the theme of this is if you really know what you're doing with AI, you probably could get a pretty good legal will out of something like ChatGPT or Claude. But most people don't have the requisite skill set with using AI to do that safely and responsibly. Because the other thing, what I was about to say is, getting the context in there properly, right? Most people, you're going to go to a fresh chat. It's got no context unless you know what to prime it with. It could make some silent assumptions in the background that are going to bite you later.
You bet. What's a cohabitation agreement? I've never heard of that before. I know what a prenup is. That's a great idea. A founders organization agreement. That's crucial. Just like a prenup, because in the beginning you're like, oh, it's going to be roses. In 5 years we'll have an IPO, and at some point somebody's going to want to bail, and you're going to need to have all your provisions accounted for. So I kind of understand those. But what cohabitation agreement?
Mm-hmm. And yeah, on that, trust me, corporate divorces, and that is what we call them in the trade. Corporate divorces are just as messy, if not messier than actual divorces. So you're absolutely spot on there. So cohabitation agreement, again, it may be based on your state, because not all states, different jurisdictions deal with this differently. So some jurisdictions, and I'm from Canada, we have this system where there's something called, being a common law couple, which means if you live together and certain conditions are in place, you can be treated like a married couple legally, even though you never actually got legally married for certain things. So what a cohabitation agreement does is for those states and jurisdictions in which that kind of family law regime applies, it's essentially a prenup for people who aren't getting married, right? You're about to move in together. And once that happens, you will potentially, sort of bring the family law legal system into your house by doing so inadvertently. And a cohabitation agreement is basically the prenup for that.
Yeah. Okay. Any other categories? This is a fascinating business model, largely because the temptation is to go to LLMs with your legal concerns, which it's great for summarizing, legal documents and saying, I always run things through and say, like, find all the red flags and give me potential conflicts of interest and stuff, because it's very hard to read legalese if you're not accustomed to that. And it is a good introduction. But even through the acquisition of my business last year, it was like having attorneys on the team made a big difference. You don't want to sit down at the table and GPT is your legal only legal recommendation. So I think there's a lot of opportunity, even if people could, that they're going to want to have the kind of expertise, and they're going to want to have a place dedicated to that, because at this price point, it's like, no, this makes me feel better because it's been obviously built by attorneys. So any other categories that you think would kind of lend itself to this kind of business model?
I mean, it's really just the same theme, right? What are the types of legal documents that people need often and are very widespread, because those tend to be the same ones that people are taking into their own hands. So, when you're doing a merger and acquisition deal and you're going to acquire a company, you're going to have a team of attorneys on there because hey, this is a big deal. This needs to be done right. Those kinds of things, that's going to stay in a lawyer's wheelhouse. But it's that sort of everyday, ordinary course of business type of stuff where the law touches business that I think lends itself more to the whether it's AI or other software solutions, right? So I gave you a few examples, employment contracts, right? When you're hiring employees or consultants is another example. As I said, NDA, service agreement. If you're in a service industry, having a solid template for what you have your clients sign when they engage you, things like that. So basically anything in any industry where business and the law are sort of meeting on a day-to-day ordinary course of business basis.
What about a cap table? I've been offered equity as kind of a distribution founder. Basically, I represent them, help bring them to market with my platform in exchange for equity, which is a tantalizing prospect. And I would definitely be interested in that, depending on certain factors. I mean, you got to do your diligence for sure. But ultimately, I was like, I don't want to get a lawyer involved, and that's annoying. And you know what I mean? Like there was the barrier for me to consider it was weighted with like $10K in lawyer fees in order for like lunch in 2 years. I don't know. Do you think you could do something like that on the cap table where there's a way for founders to easily provide equity in their company through a kind of a product like this?
Yeah, and there are some software solutions already when it comes to cap tables and all that. I say there's really two elements to that. There's the actual cap table itself, the spreadsheet or the database that's tracking who's got what. That's one element, and obviously that lends itself very well to technology. I would probably lean towards something more deterministic than AI based for something like that. But certainly, if you're faced with a large enough data set and you're coming in as an investor, using AI to help analyze that data is huge. The other element of it is the actual legal documents that are behind that cap table, right? So the cap table is tracking the numbers, who owns what are the classes, et cetera. There are legal documents that exist somewhere that are actually giving true legal meaning to all that. The cap table itself, generally speaking, is just a tracking mechanism. It doesn't actually carry the legal weight, right? There's going to be an operating agreement or a sheriff certificate or something somewhere that's going to actually dictate who owns this, what are the different classes of ownership, what are the different rights associated with those different classes, what am I getting into if I buy into this? So that element of it, you end up having to make that cost benefit decision that you described in your own example of, is this worth hiring the lawyers, spending $10K, et cetera, to look at all of this, depending on how much material it is. Oftentimes, the material is quite heavy as well. So, again, using AI there to help soften that process helps. And one thing I tell clients is, because they think, lawyers don't want us going to use AI for legal stuff because it's going to put lawyers out of business, or lawyers always think they know better, et cetera. There's some truth to that, sure. But what I often tell clients is, go ahead and use your LLM of choice to review this document first before you bring it to me. Or if it's that you want to, you and your partner are starting a new company and you want to put together your founders agreement, your partnership agreement, go ahead and use your LLM of choice to take a stab at drafting that, but treat it, but know the limit and treat that as merely a something you can now bring to the lawyer to actually draft the real agreement. Like treat it as a wireframe, essentially, right? It's going to draft, ChatGPT is going to draft this partnership agreement. You can take your time prompting it and giving it all of the terms you want, et cetera, without worrying about racking up, billable hours. And now when you go to your lawyer, you have a document that already has all that granular legwork done for him or her. And so if you come to me, now I'm not starting with a blank slate anymore. It's not an empty canvas. I already know, 80% of what the clients want. I just now need to draft it in a proper document. And maybe there's going to be, some edge case questions and issues that I need to raise, but it's going to significantly take a chunk out of the work that the lawyer has to do. And therefore the client paid less money.
Yeah. So there is like kind of a medium step there, where you have the attorney that you want signing off on it because you rely on their expertise. And if it goes to court, you'd be happy you did, but you're not spending a mint on it, but you're not also just taking a handshake deal. Okay, man, you'll get me when it all comes down. And then, you kind of end up on the outs anyway. Okay.
Or just taking what ChatGPT spit out and hoping for the best, right?
Yeah.
You're using it as a stepping stone, a wireframe, whatever you want to call it, to streamline and therefore make faster and more cost effective the job of the lawyer in doing the actual legal document.
Cool. All right, couple more. We'll get you out of here, buddy. If you were to go to college today, would you become an attorney again?
Probably not. I had that. So when I moved from Canada to Florida 3 years ago, everybody asked me that question. They said, "Are you gonna go, get your law license in Florida?" And I said, "Well, Florida is one of these states that doesn't have any reciprocity with Canada, so I would be back in law school first year with a bunch of 20-year-olds, and I have no intention of doing that." So I won't say yes or no, but I'll leave you with that anecdote and you can interpret it as you will.
Nice. You said you wanted to become an attorney because that's how you get rich. Are you rich?
Working on it.
I love it. Now, also, I know that you support a local humane society. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, so it's back in Canada, then in Ontario, in a city called Burlington. It's about 45 minutes outside of Toronto. It's where Ryan Gosling is from. That's what Burlington's claim to fame is.
Nice.
And, it's a small animal shelter. It's a charity. Well, it's actually a big animal shelter, but it's a one location charity. But we do such good work, and the community around us is very generous, so that we are able to afford to provide really top quality care for our animals. And oftentimes we have enough resources to actually go out and help help animals in other communities. Sometimes we'll even actually bring in animals from the U.S. To help with other animal shelters that are over capacity. So it's a great organization. We do great work. Small organization. I've been on the board there for 10 years now. And even when I moved away, I'm still part of the board there. So a lot of love to them. Burlington Humane Society.
Yeah, and if you're listening to this in Burlington, go down there and get yourself a dog or cat. You got dogs or cats?
Dog and a cat, but sadly they're no longer with us.
Oh, rest in peace.
Yeah, thank you.
You're ready for another.
Maybe one day, yeah.
Cool. David, this has been absolutely amazing. Tell us the best place to connect with you personally online.
Personally online, best thing to do is email. If you email us at Succession Wills, we just started, we're bootstrapped. I'm quite literally Yeah, I have AI obviously built into it to flag any emails that call for my specific attention, and I'm personally answering and connecting with people still. And it's actually been really good. It's been great for my own education, and it's been great for the company to really get that firsthand feedback. So certainly, go to successionwills.com, email us at info@successionwills.com. You can reach us on LinkedIn, Instagram, or Facebook, Succession Wills. And I have my own personal LinkedIn as well for my on my law practice side of things as well, where I basically talk all things tech and AI in terms of the intersection of the law with tech and AI. So I don't have a very nice link for that, but I'll send it to you afterwards, Ryan. Maybe you could post it in the show notes.
Happy to do it. David, congratulations on your new company. It's very cool. And thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you very much for having me.
You are about to spend anywhere from $100,000 to $300,000 on your kids' college education. And that's not a small bet. And right now, there's a very real chance that they graduate and can't find a job, not because they weren't smart enough, not because they didn't work hard enough, but because the job market changed and nobody told them. Employers are hiring AI native candidates, people who don't just know their field, but know how to work with AI at a professional level. And most colleges are not teaching this, not even close. AInativestudent.com is the program that fills that gap. It takes high school and college students and teaches them how to actually think and work with AI the way top companies expect on day one, so your investment in their degree actually pays off. You're already paying for tuition, housing, textbooks. This is the one thing that actually makes it all worth it. Go to AInativestudent.com because a diploma is a starting point. Being AI native is what gets them hired. That's AInativestudent.com.